if these tariffs go into effect at midnight tonight. The American Enterprise Institute, a conservative think tank, now points out their plans contain math errors, serious math errors. The formula even received criticism from supporters of the president. Republican mega donor and Home Depot founder Ken Langone calls the tariffs, quote, bullshit, saying in an interview with the Financial Times, quote, I don't understand the goddamn formula. I believe he's been poorly advised by his advisors in this trade situation and the formula they're applying. With us now are the two people who pointed out what they say is a major math error, Dr. Kevin Corinth and Dr. Stan Veuger. Thank you both so much for being with us. Our viewers are going to be super excited to see this formula on the screen here, and it's going to mean a ton to them. I'm about to commit serious TV crimes by asking you to explain this, but let me just point out what this essentially is that the change in tariffs right here that the president has proposed is equal to the country's exports to the U.S. minus the imports from the United States divided by these three things, okay? And you say these two things, the White House has got it completely wrong. Their math is wrong. This isn't about bad policy, you say, although it may be ultimately, but you say it's about bad math. Explain.
Well, the formula you have there, basically what it does, it divides the trade deficit, which is the numerator here, by total imports, which is the M in the denominator. And then to make their approach look a little more sophisticated, they added those two Greek letters, epsilon and phi. The epsilon they set at 4, and phi they set at 0.25. So they cancel out in the U.S. Trade Representative's report on the matter. Now, they claim that they picked that value for phi, which is the change in import prices when a tariff changes. They claim that they picked that 0.25 based on a result in a research paper, but they picked the wrong number. That number should be close to 1. Now, 1, of course, is 4 times as big as 0.25. So if you put in the right number, the change in the tariff goes down by a factor of 4. And so every tariff they calculated based on this formula is 4 times higher than it should be. So what does that mean? Yeah.
Go ahead.
The highest tariff rates. Yeah, go ahead. The highest tariff rates they came up with were close to 50%. If you divide them by 4, it goes down by a lot. As you see here. And so if they had done the calculations correctly, thank you for putting them on screen, we would have ended up with a set of tariffs that barely exceeds 10% in any country, with the top rate being below 14%. So massive differences for a number of important trading partners, including Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos. And so this, I don't think this much of the approach makes sense even conceptually, but if we're going to take their approach seriously, if we're going to say we're going to base our tariffs, our entire international trading system on this formula, they have to put in the right numbers and do the calculation correctly.
And again, this is it's all about this number right here, which you say is 4 times bigger than they say it is, which throws all their math by a factor by 4. Have you taken this to them? Do they acknowledge that they have a bum number in here?
So they have not. So a cabinet member has been asked about this. Peter Navarro was asked about this yesterday morning. They have not disagreed with us on the substance. In fact, what we've seen is that senior members of the administration, Steve Myron yesterday, who's the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, Scott Bessent this morning, who's the Treasury Secretary, they have both said, we had nothing to do with this formula. That was other people in the administration. And so, normally if you're convinced of the accuracy, the wisdom of your policies, you do not point fingers at other people in the administration and say, they came up with this, we did not.
Hey, Dr. Corinth, just to reiterate that point, they're pointing the fingers at each other here. This is not a small difference. You can see Cambodia's tariffs are 4 times bigger than they would be if the math had been correct by your calculations. And those poor Falkland Islands, right, down there, I mean, what they must be going through because of this math error. So bad math, and then Dr. Corinth, the policy itself. You note using the idea of a trade imbalance here kind of ignores other factors.
Yeah, and it's important to point out that we're talking about corrected tariffs. These are not the correct tariffs. We're just saying if you apply their formula correctly, they should have been a fourth as high as what they're saying they should be. But we are not at all endorsing this approach. It does not make sense to say that tariffs are only based on, or on trade deficits, or the trade deficits only depend on tariffs. So there's a lot of other factors, like its comparative advantage, different geographic factors that determine the trade deficit. To say that we should only base these tariffs on the trade deficit is just bad economics.
And Dr. Corinth, while we have you here on the subject of economics, and I know you guys aren't market watchers the way that some investment analysts might be, but the market futures are up today right now on the idea that all of a sudden the administration might be more willing to negotiate with certain countries than others. Does that make sense to you now that negotiations might be pushing the markets up?
Yeah, I think it suggests that the tariffs are actually. I think it suggests that the tariffs are actually would be very damaging. If small changes in the rhetoric of the administration can push up markets this much, it suggests that the market reaction would be even larger if these tariffs were made permanent.
I can say, Dr. Corinth, Dr. Veuger, this formula now will be seared in the brain of all of our viewers. I appreciate you explaining it so well.
We're keeping a very close eye on the markets this morning as investors look for signs President Trump might be willing to negotiate over his tariffs and potentially de-escalate his trade war. Take a look at this. The Dow Jones Industrials now up almost 1,400 points. That's a huge gain, at least so far, but it's still early in the day. Joining us now, the former president of the Export-Import Bank of the United States, Fred Hochberg. Fred, thanks so much for joining us. What impact are these Trump tariffs going to have on the global economy if President Trump leaves them in place?
Well, thanks for having me on the show. It ruins or wrecks the stability that the United States has been known for. In a very chaotic world, we've been a stable force, both through our currency, our rule of law, and the fact that we're the largest economy in the world. And that's all in jeopardy.
I was going to say President Trump is apparently hoping his tariffs will force other countries to come to the table to renegotiate various trading agreements, largely on a one-by-one basis. What do you make of that approach?
Well, it's very labor-intensive, number one, and it's very personal, as opposed to, regardless of where a product is produced, having the same tariff. So if you get, for example, I actually have a bunch of bananas here. Bananas are a key import. We don't grow any here. So is the tariff going to be different depending on what country sends bananas to America? And by the way, it's the most popular fruit in America, and that cost is going to go up.
Bananas, the most popular food in America? Is that what you're saying?
I think it's like 26 pounds per capita. People have for breakfast. You didn't have your banana this morning, I think.
Not yet, but I'll have some later. If it's a good, I love bananas. The president claims his tariffs will bring back American manufacturing jobs and encourage people to buy American products. What do you say? Is there truth to that?
Well, here, if we're going to negotiate one by one the tariffs right now, starting a week later, how am I going to build a factory here that takes 4 or 5 years to build, when the tariffs may go up, may go down, may disappear? Mr. Trump is going to be out of office in 2029. The next president may not continue any of these tariffs. So that's not a very stable environment. If you're going to make a large investment, you need to look out 5, 10 years, and that's very hard to do, particularly after last week.
Are there other ways, Fred, to encourage American manufacturing without sweeping tariffs?
We had a program under, I'm sorry to say, President Obama, called Select USA, where we encourage companies to build factories and to manufacture here. And we've been pretty successful. Nikki Haley was successful in South Carolina. We have a lot of foreign automakers that are making and manufacturing their cars and trucks in the United States to serve our market. And in fact, if you want a BMW SUV, it's going to be exported from the U.S. to Germany. So we do a lot of manufacturing here, and we have to recognize that, and that's a good plus, and we've been pretty successful at it.
But even if the car is made in the United States, a lot of the spare parts are being imported from overseas, right?
Correct, and they're now subject to a duty which will raise the cost of those vehicles and raise the cost for average Americans.
What does all this mean for American soft power around the world, Fred? And you've been doing this studying this a long time.
I'm very concerned about that. You know, one of our great soft power, one of our great exports has been entertainment, films, movie, higher education, college degrees. We're putting that in jeopardy. We are now deporting students that have a green card, may be married to an American citizen because of something they may have said or protested. We want to encourage more students to come to America. It brings in a lot of revenue. And on top of which, we inculcate with them, we give them American values, American way of life. And that's very positive for us around the world to have basically all these students who graduated from American universities in some way as ambassadors back to their countries. And I think we're putting a lot of that in jeopardy as well, which is a form of our soft power.
Good point indeed. Fred Hochberg, the former president of the Export-Import Bank of America. Appreciate your joining us.